When Fumi Games first revealed the concept for their 1930s-inspired shooter, it was remarkably easy to dismiss the project as a fleeting, internet-friendly gimmick. After all, the Steamboat Willie with a shotgun pitch is inherently viral, but a striking visual aesthetic alone cannot sustain a full-length campaign. Fortunately, Mouse P.I. Grahire is a resounding triumph that weaponizes its nostalgia rather than merely relying on it. Arriving on the gaming scene as a masterful blend of kinetic boomer shooter mechanics, hard-boiled detective fiction, and a stunning commitment to hand-drawn rubber hose animation, it carves out a brilliant niche entirely its own, resulting in one of the most mechanically satisfying and visually arresting indie titles of the year.
Alright, let's get this over with.
Beneath the cheerful animation lies a detective narrative focusing on societal decay and political tension. The city of Mouseburg serves as the backdrop, a sprawling metropolis dealing with post-war trauma, deep political corruption, and severe prejudices between mice, rats, and shrews. The narrative touches on the destruction of Shrew Thicket, adding a layer of historical weight to the interactions you have with the city's inhabitants. You play as Jack Pepper, voiced with a hard-boiled edge by Troy Baker. Pepper is an ex-cop and war veteran who scrapes by on cheap jobs to feed his gambling habits. He becomes tangled in a massive conspiracy, starting with a simple missing person case and crossing paths with mob bosses, ambitious politicians like Cornelius Stilton, and his old wartime comrades. You traverse seedy undergrounds, glamorous opera houses, and polluted swamps. The dialogue honors classic film noir tropes while injecting a specific humor that fits the cartoon framework. The visual presentation relies heavily on black and white tones, mimicking the painstaking animation techniques of the early 20th century. The rubber hose limbs provide enemies and characters a bouncy, elastic movement that contrasts directly with the brutal, explosive gunplay. You run through highly detailed three-dimensional environments, while the enemies themselves are drawn as two-dimensional sprites that rotate to face you, creating a blend of modern rendering and vintage artistry. The sound design goes perfectly with the visuals. An original jazz soundtrack with big band orchestras adds to the action. It goes from moody noir tones during quiet exploration to high-energy, chaotic beats during combat. Little things like the sound of a needle scratching a vinyl record when you pause the game really add to the mood. Fumi Games also deserves a lot of praise for the many accessibility options it offers. The developers added full camera comfort and contrast controls so that players could customize the visual experience. They knew that the strong black and white contrast of a 1930s style could be hard on the eyes. At its core, Mouse P.I. for Hire operates on the chassis of a frantic boomer shooter. The combat mandates constant mobility. You will die if you stand still. Players have a surprisingly strong traversal system that lets them double jump, run along walls, and grapple to stay alive against waves of mobster mice and heavily armed goons. It's easy and smooth to move around the vertical arenas in Mouseburg so you can dodge projectiles while delivering your own kind of kinetic justice. The arsenal is where the game's rubber hose style really comes to life. Every weapon has a lot of personality, from the standard issue Tommy guns to the explosive boomstick and the cartoonish sticks of dynamite. When you pull the trigger on a gun, it's not just a mechanical action, it's a beautifully animated sequence of exaggerated recoil and muzzle flashes. Upgrading your weapons gives you real benefits, like a shotgun that can fire 2 shells at once, or power-ups like spinach or coffee that let you use finger guns that are very powerful for a short time. The death animations for enemies are just as fun. Enemies can turn to ash, freeze and break, or just pop in a burst of slapstick violence. It's a happy, silly way to do virtual combat that makes the FPS genre less violent and makes every fight a visual treat. Instead of pushing you down a linear corridor, the game incorporates maze-like level designs and light Metroidvania elements. Mouseburg is split into over 20 distinct levels that encourage deep exploration. You frequently discover areas locked behind abilities you have not acquired yet, prompting you to remember their locations and return later. Between combat sections, you spend time in Jack's neighborhood, an interactive hub featuring his office, a local bar run by a hard-working shrew named John Brown, and Tammy's workshop. You put together clues on your physical investigation board, talk to people in the area to get important information, and take on optional side missions. You can even invest in cards for a baseball-themed minigame. This downtime provides you a chance to breathe and immerses you further in the day-to-day life of a working detective. For all its gorgeous black and white splendor, Mouse PI for Hire frequently stumbles when it comes to the depth of its actual game design. The most glaring issue lies in its investigative mechanics. Billed partially as a detective game, the clue boarding system is frustratingly automated and simplified. Gathering evidence rarely requires deductive reasoning. Instead, it serves merely as narrative glue to ferry the player from one shootout to the next. The detective part is an illusion. It's a missed opportunity to mix brain-teasing mystery solving with fast-paced action. Also, the fighting itself can feel generic after a while, even though it looks great. There aren't enough different types of enemies, which makes fights feel repetitive and rely more on how cool they look than on how different their tactics are. Some enemies have the dreaded bullet sponge syndrome, which means they can take a lot of damage before they die. This makes fights longer and makes your weapons less effective. The game has a clear point of no return that players can't go back to without being told, which is the worst part. This means that dedicated completionists who finish the story are suddenly locked out of the world unless they load an older save file before the last mission.
Why is it always locked?
Even though there are some clear structural problems, the underlying foundation of the experience is still very strong and interesting. The pure, unadulterated joy of exploring the intricately designed, multi-tiered environments and the immense tactile satisfaction of the gunplay far outweigh the occasional mechanical errors. It's a game that fundamentally respects the mechanical intelligence of its audience, weaving a surprisingly mature, gripping narrative beneath a deceptive veneer of childish innocence, all while successfully providing one of the most visually distinctive and mechanically sound combat sandboxes in recent memory. So I will give Mouse PI for Hire a score of 8.5 out of 10. So that's a wrap on our review. Don't forget to check our other indie game reviews and our indie game top list. Thank you for watching, guys, and see you in the next video.